Well, I know that we weren't close. It was a small school. We knew each other.
For decades, he kept Elvis's secret. He was there through the rise, the chaos, and the fall. Now, after years of silence, Red West finally tells the story Elvis never could. At 81, the king's closest bodyguard reveals haunting truths of fame, fear, and a friendship torn apart. This isn't just a confession, it's a final act of love and warning. Stay tuned as we reveal this startling confession. Red West's confession. Red West understood the price of silence. For many years, he bore the burden of what it meant to serve, protect, and oversee the most renowned man on the planet. Elvis was more than just a friend. He was an employer, a daily obligation, and at times, a mystery. Red had witnessed it all. Late-night phone calls, cross-country tours, and backstage meltdowns that no fan would ever witness. At the age of 81, Red found himself without the energy to sugarcoat the reality of what it meant to safeguard Elvis. Elvis Presley didn't merely have bodyguards, he had a private army. Yet among them, Red West occupied a distinctive role, not due to being the strongest or the loudest, but because Elvis had faith in him to speak the truth. And that was not always a simple task. Red recalled that he was demanding, not unkind, but he expected loyalty. He expected you to protect him, of course, but also to understand him. And not many truly did. Working for Elvis was more than just a job. It was a way of life. There were no set hours or guaranteed days off. Red recounted days that kicked off in the dead of night, when Elvis would suddenly feel the urge to ride his motorcycle through the desert or play racquetball until the break of dawn. Red noted that they wouldn't refuse. Rather, they had adapted to his schedule. Whenever Elvis was awake, they were awake as well. Despite the demanding hours, Red never voiced any complaints. He spoke of them with a peculiar blend of fatigue and pride. Serving Elvis was not merely a job, it was about being part of something unique, even sacred. Red reflected on Elvis's erratic behavior. He noted that one moment Elvis would be filled with laughter and playfulness like a child, and the next he would become quiet, gazing into the distance, absorbed in his own thoughts. Red understood that it was best not to intrude. Instead, he would remain nearby, allowing Elvis to navigate his feelings on his own. Red recalled that he carried not only weapons for protection, but also the emotional burdens that came with the territory. There were moments when Elvis would express his frustrations, shed tears, or even unleash his anger, and Red was among the select few permitted to witness those vulnerable aspects of him. Red remarked on Elvis's remarkable generosity, noting that if someone mentioned their car was having issues, they would find a new one waiting for them by the next morning. If a person admired his watch, it would unexpectedly become theirs. He genuinely gave from the heart. However, Red felt that deep down, Elvis was giving parts of himself, fragments he struggled to manage. However, collaborating with Elvis demanded more than just being there. It required absolute discretion. Red was always on high alert. Fans would go to great lengths to get close, and Red had to be prepared for anything. Letters filled with threats, women rushing the stage, and even imposters posing as staff sneaking into hotels. They had to examine each room, every vehicle, and all the back entrances. People believed it was merely about glamour, but in reality it involved immense pressure every single day. Yet behind the curtain, Elvis could be surprisingly reserved, even with those closest to him. There were days when he wouldn't speak to anyone at all. On other occasions, he would engage, inquiring about Red's wife or contemplating topics like mortality, divinity, or celebrity. Red once noted that Elvis had a mind that never ceased to whirl, and in those quiet moments, that inner thoughts would spill out. Red recalled that he was contemplative in ways that often went unnoticed. He cared deeply about his fans and questioned if he was still good enough. That really surprised me. After thrilling countless fans who applauded his name, he would exit the stage and ask if he did all right, as if he sincerely didn't know. Red esteemed him greatly, not just for his remarkable talent, but also for his transparency. He said that Elvis had the potential to turn into a tyrant given the power he possessed. However, he did not. He had his flaws naturally, but he sincerely aimed to be a good individual. However, being close to such immense power brought its own set of challenges. There were moments when Red disagreed with Elvis's choices, especially regarding the company he kept. Elvis was susceptible to influence, and Red observed how certain individuals only appeared when it served their interests. Red noted that he was consistently searching for someone to trust, and at times he ended up selecting the wrong individuals. This protectiveness occasionally puts Red at odds with others in their circle. Yet he never wavered in his belief that his loyalty lay with Elvis, not the surrounding machinery. He recognized the person behind the legend, prompting him to finally express his opinions. Red shared in one of his last interviews that there comes a time when you understand that if the truth isn't spoken, the story fades away with you. And Elvis deserves more than just myths. He didn't wish to tarnish Elvis's reputation. Instead, he aimed for people to grasp the burden Elvis bore, the overwhelming pressure of being everything to everyone, the isolation that comes with being idolized yet not genuinely understood, the anxiety that if he faltered, the world would turn against him. Red's admission was neither theatrical nor exaggerated. It was subdued, the voice of a man who had dwelled in the presence of greatness, witnessing both its brilliance and its shadows. He stated he has no regrets about protecting Elvis. What he grieves is his inability to save him. Red West has always said that he wasn't just a bodyguard to Elvis, but a friend, meaning that before the roaring audiences and the gleaming platinum records, before the dazzling rhinestone outfits and the bright lights of Vegas, there was simply Memphis and two young boys searching for their identity within it. A friendship in Memphis. Red West first encountered Elvis Presley in the early 1950s at Humes High School. Red was a rugged, athletic teenager, built like a linebacker, recognized for his strength as much as his unwavering loyalty. In contrast, Elvis was shy, courteous, and distinctly unique. He wore vibrant clothing, moved with a quiet grace, and held his guitar as if it were a part of him. Red immediately recognized that Elvis didn't quite belong, and he respected that. While other boys ridiculed Elvis for his slicked-back hairstyle or flamboyant attire, Red perceived something more profound, a sense of confidence, even amidst mockery. One day, when a group of students attempted to intimidate Elvis, it was Red who intervened to protect him. That significant moment ignited a friendship that would endure for more than 20 years. Red once remarked that they came from the same background. He noted that they didn't have much, but they understood one another and always supported each other. After graduating from high school, their journeys took different turns for a while. Red enlisted in the Marines, while Elvis pursued a career in music. However, when Elvis achieved fame with his hit song Heartbreak Hotel in 1956, one of the first people he reached out to was Red. He preferred the company of someone who understood his past over the unfamiliar faces that fame brought. This marked the beginning of a professional relationship. In those formative years, Red was not merely a bodyguard. He became a trusted confidant, a supportive wingman, and a shield against the turmoil that constantly surrounded Elvis. They shared countless moments together, traveling, recording, filming, and enjoying life at Graceland. Red was present during Elvis's late-night jam sessions, spontaneous road trips, and moments of introspection. Yet their relationship was not solely about the glitz and glamour of the entertainment world. Red and Elvis cultivated a friendship characterized by inside jokes, comfortable silences, and a deep, unspoken connection. They would engage in lengthy conversations about everything from cars and women to faith and family. They sparred in karate, playfully teased one another like siblings, and provided support during challenging times. Red reminisced in a subsequent interview, stating Elvis was a blast. He had an outrageous sense of humor and enjoyed playing pranks, always striving to bring laughter to others. However, he also had a deep side. He would often express his thoughts about his mother, his faith, and ponder whether he was genuinely maximizing his life. He was a perpetual thinker. A key aspect of their relationship was their shared loyalty. Red was never hesitant to voice the truth, even when Elvis preferred to avoid it. In the early days, Elvis, despite being surrounded by puppets, appreciated that honesty. As Elvis's popularity soared, so did the entourage around him. Known as the Memphis Mafia, this loyal group of friends, bodyguards, and staff orbited Elvis's life. However, Red maintained a unique status within that circle. He was one of the original members, one of the few who remembered Elvis before he became a star. However, fame has a tendency to challenge even the strongest relationships. Over time, Red noticed shifts, not only in Elvis's lifestyle but also in his essence. The late nights grew darker, the laughter diminished more swiftly, and the trust that once flowed easily began to solidify. Although Red stayed close to Elvis, the man he once regarded as like a brother started to drift away. Yet Red never ceased to care. Amidst all the highs and lows, the tours and victories, he clung to the boy he encountered in Memphis. The one who strummed his guitar in the school corridor. The one who didn't require bodyguards or entourages, just a companion. In one of his last interviews, Red spoke softly about the significance of that friendship. He reflected that they had grown up side by side. They had made their share of mistakes together and experienced things that no one else had witnessed. He expressed that he loved him deeply, truly. He also believed that, in his own way, he had been loved back. Life in Memphis. To the outside world, Elvis Presley appeared to live a life of royalty, surrounded by opulence, admiration, and a devoted entourage that shadowed his every step. Yet within that golden bubble existed a tightly knit group of men who were more than just staff. They were family. They served as protectors, enablers, entertainers, and at times reluctant witnesses to the gradual breakdown of a legend. This group was called the Memphis Mafia, a title that Elvis himself accepted with a playful wink and a smile. The name carried an air of danger, mystery, and coolness. However, for the men within it, including Red West, the reality was far from glamorous. Life in Elvis's inner circle was frequently chaotic, demanding, and unpredictable. Red West was among the original members. Together with his cousins Sonny West, Joe Esposito, Jerry Schilling, and others, Red's daily life revolved around Elvis's moods, needs, and whims. If Elvis wished to watch movies until dawn, everyone remained awake. If he desired to fly to Denver in the dead of night for a peanut butter and banana sandwich, the plane was fueled and ready to go. If he wanted a karate match in the backyard or a gospel sing-along in the living room, it occurred regardless of the hour or location. Red reminisced that there was no set schedule. It was all about Elvis time. You adapted to his rhythm, sleeping when he slept, eating when he ate, and moving when he moved. The Memphis Mafia wasn't your typical hired help. Many were childhood friends, relatives, or close companions. Elvis preferred to surround himself with those he could trust, individuals who would see him as a person rather than a celebrity. This sense of familiarity fostered strong connections, but it also led to blurred boundaries. They were more than just employees. They were friends, supporters, and caretakers all in one. Their responsibilities reflected the unpredictability of Elvis's moods. Some managed logistics, while others took charge of security. Red West often found himself at the heart of the action, mediating between Elvis and overly enthusiastic fans, planning spontaneous road trips, and addressing minor issues before they escalated. When necessary, he took on the role of enforcer. If anyone crossed the line, it was Red who intervened. However, it wasn't solely about work. There were instances of genuine joy and camaraderie. Red reminisced about evenings filled with poker games, shared jokes, and music that echoed into the early hours. Elvis had a passion for entertaining, not just on stage, but also at home. He would reenact scenes from his beloved films, play pranks on his friends with intricate setups, and draw everyone into impromptu jam sessions. Red recalled that Elvis despised solitude, and with them around, he never had to face it alone. Though his mood frequently interchanged, what initially felt like a brotherhood gradually transformed into a fortress, one not built to protect Elvis from the outside world, but rather to shield him from himself. The group that once anchored him slowly morphed into a buffer against reality. Unhealthy habits were ignored. Risky behaviors went unaddressed. While some, like Red, attempted to sound the alarm, their worries frequently fell on deaf ears or worse, were met with resistance. An unspoken rule lingered within the group: never challenge Elvis. He was kind-hearted yet sensitive, appreciative but fiercely proud. A suggestion made at an inopportune time could be interpreted as betrayal. Consequently, over the years, many in the inner circle learned to remain quiet, to comply, even when it pained them to witness. Red found himself in a challenging situation. He cherished Elvis like a brother, yet he recognized the warning signs that others overlooked. The growing reliance on medication, the unpredictable mood swings, the seclusion. There were times when Elvis would completely retreat, vanishing into his room for days, only to re-emerge when the world felt secure once more. And when he did, the performance continued. After all, the king had an audience to satisfy. Within Graceland, it was a realm, but it also felt like a prison. Elvis's stardom crafted a reality where conventional rules were irrelevant, financial issues were non-existent, time was a mere illusion. Everything centered around ensuring the star was content, healthy, and prepared to entertain. Yet, at times, the very efforts to shield him became the source of his distress. Nevertheless, Red remained. Through the lengthy tours, the grueling travel, the exhilarating highs and heartbreaking lows, he stayed by his side. Not for wealth, not for recognition, but because he felt he was among the few who genuinely understood Elvis and one of the rare individuals who still recognized the man behind the image. Red once commented that he was a good man, He acknowledged that the man was not perfect, but emphasized that he possessed a caring heart. Red noted that when this man opened up to someone and placed his trust in them, there was no one more devoted, generous, or pleasant to be with. However, that loyalty came with its own costs. Red and others frequently carried the emotional weight of witnessing Elvis's decline, helpless to alter the trajectory, trapped in a position where love sometimes required silence. Being part of Elvis's close-knit group provided access, certainly, but it also brought with it a sense of duty. It involved watching someone you cherished shine on the grandest stages, all the while being aware of the shadows that trailed him home. And for Red West, those recollections filled with laughter, chaos, fatigue, and profound sorrow remained etched in his mind. Red West witnessed the most dazzling moments of Elvis Presley's life: the packed arenas, the ceaseless cheers, the exhilaration of crafting music that resonated with millions. Yet he also observed what many never saw: the dark side of Elvis Presley's life. Behind the curtain, Elvis was not merely contending with fame, he was grappling with his own inner struggles. And gradually the toll became evident. In the initial years, Elvis exuded an energy that felt Red West witnessed the most dazzling moments of Elvis Presley's life: the packed arenas, the ceaseless cheers, the exhilaration of crafting music that resonated with millions. Yet he also observed what many never saw. He could perform for hours on end, then spend the night watching television or riding motorcycles with his entourage. However, as time progressed, a change became apparent. Red started to pick up on the subtle indicators: sluggish movements, lapses in memory, emotional fluctuations. Then the medication entered the picture. It began innocently enough. Elvis struggled with insomnia, headaches, and overwhelming performance anxiety. Doctors, many eager to cater to the king, prescribed a cocktail of sleeping pills, pain relievers, and stimulants. Red commented that it was legal. He added that this made the situation worse, as the individual did not think he had a problem. Yet Red sensed that something was amiss. Elvis wasn't merely relying on the pills for sleep or to enhance his performances. He was using them as a means of escape from the pressure, the pain, and the daunting task of living up to the iconic status he had achieved. As time went on, Elvis's reliance on these substances became increasingly apparent. He would doze off mid-conversation. His words would become slurred. He would erupt in anger only to apologize moments later. The man who once illuminated spaces now bore a burden that seemed too heavy to lift. One of the most heart-wrenching aspects for Red was witnessing the transformation of Elvis's character. He grew increasingly suspicious, becoming less trusting even towards those who had stood by him for many years. Paranoia took hold. He felt as though people were observing him, stealing from him, and conspiring against him. Red reminisced about nights when Elvis would obsessively check the locks, insist on sudden security checks, or accuse his staff of treachery without any proof. Red noted that he no longer trusted easily. He mentioned that there were times when even they were not trusted. One moment, they were seen as his brother, and the next, he would view them as a stranger. This paranoia was intensified by his isolation. Even though he was constantly surrounded by people, Elvis experienced a loneliness that only the truly famous can comprehend. He couldn't stroll down the street, visit a diner, or engage with a stranger without being swarmed or scrutinized. Red noted that while fans perceived Elvis as larger than life, he often felt like a captive in his own realm. At Graceland, the curtains were perpetually drawn. The phones were under strict surveillance. Very few individuals outside the inner circle could reach him. Red recalled how Elvis would sometimes spend days without stepping out of his room. He'd just sit there in silence, watching TV, half awake, half somewhere else. We didn't know what to say anymore. The pressure to keep performing only worsened the situation. The world craved Elvis, the dynamic, charismatic figure of rock and roll. Yet the true individual behind that persona was utterly drained, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. His health was on a downward spiral, but the machine continued to churn. Tours were planned, albums were anticipated, and Elvis, regardless of his condition, always agreed to participate. Red mentioned that Elvis never figured out how to say no, not to fans, not to promoters, nor to those urging him to persist. He didn't want to let anyone down. The repercussions of that yes-man mentality were catastrophic. Red frequently attempted to step in, first gently, then more assertively, but he was often brushed aside. Others in the inner circle were reluctant to disrupt the status quo. Elvis was in charge. If he desired more pills, he received them. If he wanted to convince himself that everything was fine, everyone simply smiled and nodded in agreement. However, Red was different from the rest. He had known Elvis prior to his rise to fame, and he couldn't turn a blind eye to the changes he was witnessing. He observed his friend rapidly gain weight, lose his grip on reality, and become increasingly disconnected. The brilliance that once characterized Elvis had faded. Red noted that he was present, but not truly, like a shadow of his former self. On certain nights, Red would position himself just outside Elvis's door, listening intently, waiting, hoping for a call. Occasionally, he would hear one. Other times, silence prevailed. Yet Red remained nearby, understanding deep within that Elvis didn't truly wish to be alone, even if he struggled to express it. Red confessed that Elvis was frightened of death, frightened of losing everything, but above all, frightened of being forgotten. This fear propelled Elvis to take drastic measures. He would insist on spontaneous concerts at unusual hours, instruct staff to completely redecorate sections of Graceland overnight, or abruptly choose to fly across the country without any apparent reason. Red recognized these actions weren't mere, they were distractions, desperate efforts to regain control over a life that had long since slipped from his grasp. One particularly haunting tale Red recounted involved Elvis's later years, during which he became fixated on numerology, ancient texts, and strange spiritual theories. He would immerse himself in books for hours, convinced that concealed meanings and codes contained the solutions to his anguish. Red remarked that Elvis was on a quest for purpose, for tranquility, something greater than all of this. Yet, he never discovered it. In spite of the shadows, Red never ceased to see the individual he had once stood up for in a high school corridor. The boy who simply wanted to sing, to make his mother proud, to be cherished. He was still there, Red stated, buried beneath all the stress and suffering. But he was there. The fallout. In the summer of 1976, Red West faced a devastating turn of events. After nearly 20 years of steadfast dedication, through tours, crises, and personal sacrifices, he was abruptly and unceremoniously dismissed from Elvis Presley's close-knit circle. The news didn't come directly from Elvis. Instead, it was relayed through intermediaries. It was cold, formal, and devoid of any explanation, just a finality. For Red, this was more than just losing a job. It was the destruction of a bond he believed to be unbreakable. He had stood by Elvis before the fame, before the gates of the mansion, and before the roaring crowds. He had fought for him, bled for him, and shielded him not only from physical dangers, but also from emotional breakdowns. And now, he found himself cast aside. Red was not alone in this upheaval. Sonny West, his cousin, and bodyguard David Hebler were also dismissed. The formal explanation pointed to budget reductions, but whispers within Graceland suggested deeper issues. Red had become too vocal, too confrontational regarding Elvis's health, and unwilling to contribute to the defeat. And that might have been the core issue. Red had always been open about his worries regarding Elvis's escalating substance use, his unpredictable actions, and how those in his circle persisted in spreading the false story instead of confronting the reality of the man. He faced Elvis head-on multiple times, something that most would shy away from. Red wasn't acting out of rebellion, he was acting as a true friend. Yet in the fragile environment of Presley's inner circle, even genuine affection could be misconstrued as betrayal. Red would later reflect that he shared the truth with him, and perhaps he wasn't ready to hear it. The emotional repercussions were profound. Red had centered his life around Elvis, organized his daily routine around his needs, delayed his own dreams to stay close. Being cast aside without a proper farewell or explanation left a scar deeper than many understood. However, the story didn't conclude there. Hurt, bewildered, and feeling powerless as he observed Elvis's declining health and troubling behavior, Red made a crucial choice. He decided to help write a book. Not just any book, but the first candid, unvarnished story of what life truly entailed within the Presley dynasty. Its title was straightforward and shocking: Elvis, What Happened? Co-authored by Red West, Sonny West, and David Hebler, the book aimed to reveal the reality behind the king of rock and roll. They maintained it wasn't a smear campaign, it was a heartfelt appeal, a cautionary tale, a love letter disguised as a wake-up call. They hoped that by laying bare the truth, they could spur Elvis and those who supported him into taking action. But that's not how it was received. When news of the book leaked, Graceland exploded. The Presley camp condemned it as betrayal. Fans, outraged and heartbroken, flooded the authors with hate mail. Red was branded a traitor, a sellout, a bitter ex-friend trying to cash in on pain. In the public eye, the timing looked terrible. Elvis, What Happened, was released on August 1, 1997. Just 2 weeks later, Elvis passed OM. The headlines were brutal. Elvis betrayed by his closest friends. Tell-all book drops, then the king dies. It didn't matter that the manuscript had been completed before his death. It didn't matter that Red had once risked his life for Elvis. In that moment, perception became reality. And Red West became the man who aired Elvis's secrets to the world right before the world lost him. But for Red, it wasn't about profit or payback. It was about heartbreak. He mentioned years later that they had attempted everything else. They had tried talking to him and to those around him, but nothing was effective. Therefore, they resorted to the only option they had remaining. They decided to tell the truth. The book was raw and unsparing. It detailed the substance use, the violent outbursts, the isolation, and the fear. It painted a portrait of a man trapped in a prison of fame. But it also showed Elvis's kindness, his generosity, his deep insecurity and spiritual searching. It was, in many ways, the most human portrait of Elvis ever written, and perhaps that's why it hurt so many people. It stripped away the iconography and showed the broken man underneath. Red never apologized for writing it, but he carried the consequences for the rest of his life. He lost friends. His reputation took a hit, and perhaps most painful of all, he never got the closure he needed from Elvis himself. They never spoke again after the firing. The man Red considered his brother died without reconciliation. Red expressed that he would have done anything to save him. He emphasized that he would do anything, stating that the book was the final option they had left. Decades later, as time softened public judgment and more honest stories about Elvis's life began to surface, many came to see Elvis. What Happened? Not as an attack, but as a tragic act of love, an imperfect attempt to tell the truth before it was too late. And tragically, it was too late. Looking back, Red never claimed to be a hero. He admitted his own faults, his own moments of silence and complicity, but he also made one thing clear: he never stopped caring. Not on the first day of guarding Elvis, not on the day he was fired, not even when the book caused a storm that nearly drowned him. Red stated that even though the world loved Elvis, they knew him. They saw the pain, the doubt, the fear. They saw it when no one else did. And they couldn't just sit back and watch him die. It wasn't betrayal. And though it came too late to save Elvis, Red West's choice to speak out eventually opened the door for a deeper, more honest understanding of the man behind the myth. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.